Dear participants of the third annual conference at the occasion of the anniversary of the Šiluvoje Declaration, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers not only for giving me the opportunity to address you, albeit only through a video message, but really for bringing this conference together once more. How not to destroy democracy and freedom, you ask? We could cut a long story really short by stating that organizing such an exchange, providing a forum for reflection and discussion, is precisely the answer to these questions you raise in the conference topic. But while that would not be far from the truth, it would certainly not exhaust the topic. Yes, we must return to a robust debate of the most foundational things concerning freedom and democracy. Yet, this might not be enough to safeguard against some very real threats we're facing today. I will try and offer you the perspective of human rights advocates in just a little while, but let me very briefly share something personal up front. I am a citizen of Europe. This continent, its history, multiple traditions, the view on it both from various places within and from the outside have influenced and shaped my thinking. Born and raised in East Germany, I experienced the fall of the Iron Curtain just before graduating from high school. I had an opportunity to spend a year in the United States, then went on to study law in the then reunified Germany. During my studies, I lived in Minsk, Belarus for 1 year, and I remember even back in the 1990s, long before Lithuania acceded to the European Union, I still needed a visa to come there. My fellow students and I used to take a bus from Minsk to Vilnius whenever we felt the weight was too heavy on us and we needed a breath of freedom. I live in Austria now. My work is to oversee the legal advocacy of ADF International in continental Europe. Thanks to my work, I travel frequently within the entire continent. However, beyond geography, I feel most deeply rooted in the Christian faith that I had the privilege of being introduced to by my parents. Wherever I go, whatever I come across, I know three foundational things are relevant here to our topic. First, there are rules, the law in a very fundamental understanding, and I might not be able to abide by these laws with everything I do. Second, there is an ultimate authority to whom I am accountable, and I by myself might not meet the standard. And thirdly, redemption is available because someone else paid a price for others, including me. Please forgive me for dwelling on these personal matters for so long. I'll get back to these in the end, and I hope I can show you why I feel it was important. A brief introduction as it relates to our topic, what is ADF International? Alliance Defending Freedom International is a faith-based human rights organization that advocates for the freedom and the inherent dignity of every human being. A relatively small team of around 100 team members, lawyers and others, works from 7 locations around the globe, mostly in close connection with international organizations such as the United Nations or the European Union. For example, we do have an office in Brussels where we closely monitor the activities of the EU. Politically, we're non-partisan and we collaborate with anyone willing to collaborate with us on matters we align on. Our general topic, umbrella topic, so to speak, is the protection of the right to freedom of religion or belief, as guaranteed by the international human rights treaties, such as the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights or the Council of Europe's European Convention on Human Rights. Alongside the national constitutions, these international instruments provide a solid and tested framework for the protection of these fundamental freedoms and rights. We also concern ourselves with 4 relatively closely related topics, being number 1, freedom of expression. What good is freedom of religion when you cannot talk about it? Second, parental rights. What good are rights when you cannot raise your children as you think is right? Thirdly, marriage and family in the traditional Judeo-Christian understanding, and fourthly, the right to life as a right foundational to the enjoyment of any other right. So what do we actually do? ADF International is active in 3 principal ways. Firstly, we represent clients in cases that have the potential to set a good precedent before international courts. Secondly, we monitor lawmaking, mostly at the international level, but together with partners, we also engage nationally. In fact, we're currently involved in cases in around 80 different countries around the world. This is only possible by virtue of a network of allied lawyers and other professionals who are willing to side with us and to take a stand on these matters. And perhaps most importantly, we take part in the education and formation of a new generation. We firmly believe that today's problems will hardly be overcome by those who brought them about. Rather, we're confident that a new generation will rise and chart a way forward. Over the past 10 years, we have conducted Arete Academy, named after the Greek word for virtue, in Latin America, in Europe, and South Asia. This year, in fact, as we speak, in London, my colleagues are holding an Arete Commonwealth with participants from 56 countries. Arete Academy prepares exceptional students and young professionals across the globe to pursue God's unique calling to their career and to deploy their full potential as they grow in servant leadership in positions of public impact. Arete Academy offers a unique combination of biblical worldview at the highest intellectual level applied to the most pressing challenges of our time: character and spiritual formation and specialized professional development. How can we safeguard freedom and democracy in Western societies? That brings me straight into the main topic of my brief address today. How can it be that we are living in a region that holds the law in high regard, yet we are feeling certain totalitarian tendencies creeping into our lives? How is this possible when, in fact, the constitutions of European countries in unison guarantee democratic decision-making and subject all branches of government to the rule of law? When I had the privilege of addressing this very conference 2 years ago, I named 5 trends based on what we see in our work. Since I had no particular insights into the future at the time, I'm delighted for the opportunity to revisit these now and look at what has happened during the 2 years that have passed. The first and maybe most impactful trend seemed to me the marginalization of organized and public religion, and perhaps even more dangerous, a ready self-marginalization of many religious people. A second trend I pointed out back then was an increasingly intolerant secularism, a belief presenting itself as something objective and thus non-objectionable, calling other and equally protected by law beliefs or religious expression into questions. I also named a third trend building off that, a new kind of content censorship, banning certain expressions from certain places or excluding them from discourse entirely. A fourth trend was challenging parental authority, especially in education, and a fifth trend was the instrumentalization of religion to serve certain nationalist interests, the latter predominantly found outside Europe, but some tendency is also here. Let me revisit some of these now again. Marginalization of public religion. Recent data shows that religion is starting to become increasingly popular among the younger generation again. That's great. Yet in politics or in public discourse and throughout academia in Europe, it is still very uncommon to openly address religious matters. And I would like to be clear, that's perfectly fine as far as religion's convictions are unsuitable to replace an argument. Freedom of religion as a human right demands that while everybody is free to believe as they please, no particular belief can be imposed on anyone. But it continues to be problematic when the general sentiment is hostile to the very idea of religion. And religious people continue to contribute to the issue when they are unable to relate what is important to them in a way that others at least have an opportunity to understand why it matters. As many religious traditions fade or are emptied of their original meaning, basic knowledge about religion and its practice vanishes as well. Where there is a lack of knowledge, fear can all too easily creep in, and something that has greatly contributed to its continent's language, legal systems, and everyday interactions suddenly is suspicious to many. We see this, for example, in the case of Finnish MP Dr. Päivi Räsänen. Together with Dr. Juhana Pohjola, a bishop of a branch of the Finnish Lutheran Church, she continues to find herself on trial over a tweet, including a picture of Romans 1:8 and asking the Lutheran Church of Finland whether sponsoring the Helsinki Pride Parade was a good idea. In spite of the police intending to conclude investigations without a trial, the Prosecutor General of Finland took up the case and also investigated a pamphlet written by her and the bishop as long ago as 2004. At the time, the law under which they are now charged was not even in force. Dr. Räsänen was found not guilty by the first instance court and also by the second instance court. For almost 2 years now, the case has been pending before the third instance, the Finnish Supreme Court, and a hearing is currently scheduled for October 30. A total of 7 years on trial so far for an expression of one's own faith clearly sends a signal. No wonder people of faith are self-marginalizing, but it's worthwhile to firmly stand on the guaranteed right of freedom of religion or belief. Similarly to the second trend, intolerant secularism continues to be on the rise. If it is the new normal of objectivity, it becomes hard for people to defend other views, regardless of the fact that both enjoy equal protection under the law. One example is the selective exclusion of religious viewpoints or religiously motivated viewpoints from university campuses. ADF International had the privilege of supporting a pro-life group in Regensburg in Germany that had been denied equal participation rights. While not presenting overly religiously, the group's members are mostly Christians, and their conviction that every human life is sacred and should be protected from conception to natural death is rooted in their faith. Their applications for group status, allowing them access to venues and the freshest fare every year, just like any other group would have, were denied without as much as a justification simply because of their pro-life stance. With our support, the group brought a lawsuit against the university, and without even a hearing, the uni offered a settlement. It took a legal fight, but the group won their status very easily. The case shows that resistance can be removed by simply showing up and claiming the guaranteed right. On the third trend, content censorship also continues. Last year, the European Union's Digital Services Act entered into force. The regulation, directly applicable in all member states, grants unprecedented powers to the European Commission and online platforms, leading to serious risks for free speech. The law's vague terms like hate speech and misinformation invite overreach and incentivize companies to censor more content than necessary, since heavy fines punish under-enforcement but not excessive removal. We also see the potential of such European standards spilling over globally, chilling online debate far beyond the EU. And the concept of censoring content takes hold all too easily. The UK and now also Germany have recently passed laws banning certain expressions from certain places. Namely, in the vicinity of an abortion clinic, anyone expressing disagreement with the understanding of abortion as a right might run the danger of being removed. But in the UK, for example, even offering a silent prayer or a conversation or any sort of help to women in a pregnancy crisis has been ruled a criminal offence. Isabel von Spruce was arrested twice while silently praying in her hat, nothing else. Adam Smith Connor was found guilty by a criminal court for the same offence. And Livia Tosici-Bolt was found guilty and charged a fine of £20,000 for holding up a sign saying, "Here to talk if you want." But there's hope as well. Both cases are going to appeal, and in Germany a pro-life group conducting peaceful prayer vigils outside an abortion clinic has recently been granted the right to do so by a court. Similarly, the fourth trend, parental authority, remains under challenge, as school curricula embrace the WHO standards for sexuality education in Europe. Parents are left out of a matter of great intimacy and importance, and while their primary right to educate and raise their children in accordance with their conviction is guaranteed by the European Convention on Human Rights explicitly. In conclusion, where does this leave us? I'm glad that in the conference abstract you mentioned the famous Böckenförde theorem named after former constitutional judge in Germany. It states that the liberal secular states rely on preconditions that they cannot guarantee themselves. In the original quote, Böckenförde actually says that this is the great adventure that the modern state has undertaken for freedom's sake. A glance at contemporary governments' attempts to safeguard freedom does not reveal anything promising. They're not very adventurous when it comes to that. Rather, it seems that good old Europe is overemphasizing the role of the state and the control over the citizens, as if citizens of this continent needed the state to show them what freedom is. Let's remember that while the state has great authority, and rightfully so, as there is a good reason for government, it does not have the ultimate authority. It should refrain from attempts to tell citizens what is right and wrong, and rather should respect the rule of law and practice self-restraint when it comes to content. As European citizens, we enjoy great protection of our freedoms and rights. Let's not forget that freedom is like a muscle. If not exercised, it will decline. And further, let's not forget that freedom cannot be taken for granted. Its exercise can require us to leave our comfort zone, to risk an argument and to test a friendship. But under the European legal framework, we have everything in place to ensure that we can exercise our freedoms peacefully and hold the authorities accountable in situations where they exceed their powers. At the beginning, I told you 3 things I understood from faith. Number 1, there are rules. Number 2, there's an ultimate authority. And number 3, redemption is available. In the spirit of the Šiluvoje Declaration, let us commit ourselves to a life rooted in truth, beauty and the dignity of the human person, guided not by the fleeting sentiment or hollow gestures, but by a courageous love that seeks the true good. As the Declaration reminds us, our civilization flourishes only when inner virtue, not merely legal edicts, shape our character and community. However, please also know that the laws of this continent are on your side as you pursue this aim. Let us firmly stand on the human rights guarantees and boldly claim these freedoms. Thank you very much for your attention.